Greetings and felicitations.
Hip hip hurrah, tally ho.
Hey, Cutie Pie.
Hey, Puddin'.
We're going to discuss the ongoing Star Trek series produced by IDW Comics entitled Star Trek Year 5. Now, the first issue was cover dated April of 2019. Do you remember how excited we were when we heard there was going to be a new Star Trek ongoing series?
Yeah, because they were doing all these limited series like 3 issues or 6 issues or something. So it was phenomenal to see this.
Exactly. I think that's something that's severely lacking in the Star Trek comic world is to have an ongoing series. Because the last time we had an ongoing series was Waypoint, and that halted publication. So like you said, we've been limited to just short stories here and there. But to have something on a monthly basis, and especially it's a bonus to have a TOS era, yeah, we are elated over it.
And we have been collecting them since they started coming out.
All right, now this is the first time ever that we've had a cover or any piece of official Star Trek artwork by Greg Heidelbrand. And it's been stated that he's got the essentially geek hack trick for doing art for major properties. We know that he did the poster art for the original Star Wars movie. He did quite a bit of artwork for J.R.R. Tolkien's works, such as The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And now the trifecta is doing Star Trek artwork. So, I mean, we're super geeked out to see this. What do you think about issue 1's cover?
Yeah, I love the characters. The cover. I mean, showing all the characters and showing them in action, having the beam out effect, and all the likenesses are good. But McCoy's face is so serious on this. He's the one that's centered, and he's just like, I mean, it looks just like him, but it's just funny to see him so serious like that.
And he has that fantasy element to him. I mean, they actually look a little bit cherubian.
They do.
Which I love his style. From a little kid, I love that fantasy look. So I'm glad to see this developed into a Star Trek series. Now, the first storyline was written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly. The artwork is exceptional. No doubt about it. Stephen Thompson knocked it out of the park here. What'd you think about how it began? And we're going into Tholian territory.
I loved how they used the Tholians. I mean, a race that we've seen before, but we know very little about them.
And we got to know more about them because of the Enterprise TV series.
Yeah, they showed them again on Enterprise, but even then, I mean, that was in the Mirror Universe.
Mm-hmm. But at least we got a full body out of them. I know there was fan speculation that they didn't have limbs. We look at some of the drawings that were in non-canon books, and it just showed them more of like diamond-like creatures that just floated, whereas Enterprise actually gave them a body with spider-like attachments to them.
The spider idea came from, well, the fact that they make a web, so we would think that they would be like spiders. And it was a cool look because it was still alien, which is just what we wanted. It's appropriate. And so in this comic also saying that they're crystalline, because that's also what the impression that we got from them seeing them on TOS with just seeing their face, the way the effects were. Mm-hmm. It did look like they had a crystalline face.
It totally makes sense. Now, as a side note, this is supposed to be the 5th year of the Enterprise's 5-year mission. The first 3 years were somewhat chronicled. Obviously, we don't have all the stories of the original series. Year 4 is most likely speculation the animated series, and there have been 2 IDW miniseries based on Year 4. So, this is the final year of the 5-year mission. Let's talk about the plot of this story, because this plot is going to extend out into further issues.
What I like about this, because they're talking about it's at the beginning of Year 5, and Kirk has found out he's already going to be promoted to Admiral, and it's about him looking back on the first 4 years and reminiscing and kind of not really being happy, being more depressed because He loves the ship, he loves being in command, and he's not sure if he wants to be an admiral.
So this is actually setting us up for the events that unfold in Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Yes, and I love how they do that, filling in the gap from TOS to the motion picture. And since this is, this was made in 2019, so we've got all the Star Trek history that we know of. So at this time, they know about, Carol, Marcus, and David. So this story has, somewhere in these issues, it has Kirk talking to Carol Marcus, and his son David is still a child at this time. But Kirk is still, begging to be a part of David's life, and Carol just said, well, we're too different, and you wouldn't be around to actually be his father.
So we're seeing the human side of Captain Kirk, and this is going to follow through in subsequent issues. And we're seeing, especially because it's a comic book format, there's going to be Star Trek Adventure. And this time, they land on the planet where there are many dead Tholians. And the mystery is, how did they all die?
And they don't really know. So it is interesting, and somehow they figure out that maybe these are Tholian outcasts, and then maybe they were actually killed by other Tholians.
But there is a survivor, and they find out that it's a very young Tholian. So they decide to protect him because they assume that others are going to come to hunt him down. And this thread is going to continue on for an extended period of time throughout the series.
Yeah, the thread of having the Tholian child on the ship, yeah, that's sort of like, it becomes a secondary story through several of these issues, and it was a great story. It was nice to see that, the way it developed, that they have to figure out a way to communicate with this child.
And this is what I want out of a monthly comic. I like to have, very similar to what Chris Claremont did with the X-Men, there would be an underlying current throughout numerous issues, but you could still pick up a few issues and have self-contained stories. So the pattern here is every 2, maybe every 3 issues are going to have a story arc, but there's this massive thread of, okay, now we have a Tholian on the ship. What are we doing with this Tholian? And how can we communicate with it? Which I love, because Uhura has a major part in these stories because of her communication skills.
Yeah, it looks like there was, so in one of the issues when Scotty was in command, and he's the one that called Uhura to help with the child to try to figure out how to communicate with it. The thing is they decided to give it a name, Bright Eyes. Mm-hmm. And that's funny too. So Bright Eyes was actually, it was used in the Planet of the Apes reboot movies.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah. So,
that was Charlton Heston.
It was an ape that was named Bright Eyes. Oh, it was, well, yeah, well, I was saying in the reboot movies, it was the name of Caesar's mother.
Yeah. I was thinking the original Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, in the original, did they say, they might have said Bright Eyes
too. That's what they called Charlton Heston.
Okay, yeah, so that was funny.
They called the human Charlton, yeah. So to the apes, the human was the alien.
Yes. But also, just saying Bright Eyes, doesn't that make you want to sing Total Eclipse of the Heart? You didn't think of that too?
No, I was thinking the original Planet of the Apes, and I forgot about the reboots, how they used that reference. And also there was a Planet of the Apes Star Trek crossover by IDW Comics. So, I mean, they tend to hire people who are fans, which I think is fantastic, of not just Star Trek, but of genre films, because you get all these little references, and nerdy us, we're catching the references.
Yeah, we always like to see that, so that was cool. So having the child Bright Eyes, and then Uhura giving it a teddy bear, and then he crushed the teddy bear accidentally, and so a lot of neat things there. Oh, and Uhura's finally figuring out that it understood math. And so she had a way to convert math to language to kind of communicate with it.
And this goes back to what we know about real-world science and space exploration. When they sent that golden record out in the late 1970s, had quite a bit of mathematical equations, because it's figured aliens won't understand Earth languages, but they should be able to understand mathematics. It's a universal language.
Yes, math and music. That was in the capsule that NASA sent out into space. Yes.
All right, the storyline continues, or I should say the series continues, with returning to Jojo Krako's planet. I mean, this was unexpected.
Yeah, so we get a sequel to a piece of the action. Another great reference, another thing that we love, seeing this planet again that we're familiar with, and so now we get to find out what happened to them.
This one is a bit jarring for me because it's only a 2-year period between the original series episode and this story, and the city on this planet has really exploded with buildings and with culture and with people. I think it grew a little bit too fast, and they're going a little bit too forward for any believability.
They advanced more than they should have in that period of time. I mean, nobody can do that, really. And the other thing that was really strange about that story was the way they said it happened. I mean, we know they were influenced by McCoy leaving his communicator there, but did you know that someone could tap into a communicator and learn all of Earth history and everything like that?
Yeah, political structures and revolutions, and it was a little bit too much to be believable. Not that Star Trek, the original series episode Piece of the Action, was believable, but out of all the stories that we read out of this series, this 2-part storyline was not my favorite.
It had some interesting scenes. It's just that, it had those pieces that we mentioned that kind of that make you step out of the story. So what did you think of Spock running for leader of the planet?
Again, it's just too stupid. I mean, it's never going to happen. Spock's going to run for any office.
And then Spock did explain, he just, when Kirk said, "What, you did this?" and Spock said, "It was necessary, Captain, to find out," the way he said it was to find out what Jojo Krako really had in mind. Jojo was the leader of a dissident group on this planet, the group that wanted space exploration.
Mm-hmm. But by issue 5, we're going to break away out of that storyline and roll into another one. This is, I say, the one that focuses on Uhura, these next 2 issues, more than ever before. And it shows how much of a skilled linguist she is. Not only is she spending time with Bright Eyes, learning more to communicate with him through various means, there's also trouble on the ship where everyone's having a problem communicating. Their thoughts are being projected above their voices. So people are actually fighting physically with each other. And Uhura saves the day by showing them how to communicate by written message instead of verbal message, because they have to get around this entity that's warping their minds.
It is interesting that Uhura was the one who figured out what was going on when people on the ship started fighting. And she did the little demonstration with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy to explain to them how it was happening. That was really interesting, and the fact that they did that, and the way it was illustrated in the comic, we won't have to go into it too much because you probably want to read it, but the way it was illustrated was really different than, because it wasn't explained. I mean, it was happening, and you don't know what's happening until Uhura explains it.
Also, we're getting a glimpse of the motion picture era style Klingons, and the TOS crew actually starts laughing, saying, "Why do you look like that?"
Oh yeah, and that part was strange too, because I know that, because they're looking at these Klingons with ridges, which we know, well, we know the first time Klingons had ridges was in Star Trek the Motion Picture, but so this is supposed to take place before that. But yeah, they're seeing these Klingons, and Kirk says, "What's on your face?" But the thing is, you don't know if he's talking about the ridges or the fact that this, the Klingon leader really does have something on his face that looks like it doesn't belong there. It looks like he's got a piece of metal on the side of his face, and it looks like he's got boils next to the piece of metal, right? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, it's a bandaged face, but instead of having a bandage, he has a piece of plate metal screwed onto his face.
Right, and they never explained that.
They did. But some kind of battle damage.
Right, but so when Kirk says, "What's on your face?" you don't you don't know which thing he's talking about, the ridges or the little Band-Aid.
Good point.
Yeah.
The story continues with another alien race that we're being exposed to. This is going to be a race that can breathe underwater.
Icosans. So they're in space, and they encounter a Tholian web. There's actually a web in space that was put there specifically to keep the Enterprise from going back to Earth. They knew it was between Enterprise and Earth. The Tholians put it there because they want that one child back that's on the ship. And there happens to be another ship that was accidentally caught in the web, and that's the one that has the Icosan on it. Well, it had several Icosans, but they all died except for the captain of the ship.
I like this species, a new environment, underwater environment. I love the fact that Kirk and Sulu and Chekhov, they were able to explore this strange new world and see that it's a divided world. Some are underwater, some are above water. The unique properties that were part of this world. I mean, the coloring especially is stunning for these underwater issues. The colorist Sebastian Chang really knocked it out of the park.
They did a good job of showing what it looked like being underwater or on the ship and having the water. So as the story develops, Sulu has a relationship with this one Icosan leader. Eyal was the name.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that they even show him getting it on at one point.
So Sulu and Eyal together, it was strange, but it was okay. I mean, it harkens back to Harry Kim falling in love with an alien. So now we have, in this story, it's Sulu.
But it's happened 100 times with Captain Kirk, so it makes sense that Sulu gets a piece of the action here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that this one is even more alien.
Yes.
That's why it's a little more strange. But they do fall in love. And so it's something. I mean, yeah, Sulu deserves that. He never fell in love on the original series.
And we're going to cap off, because this is an ongoing series, we'll just continue on with another block of books. But we're going to cap off this episode with the Star Trek 2020 Year 5 Valentine's Day special. This is a one-shot that came out. What'd you think about it? It's focused on James T. Kirk.
I love that story. Yeah, so, I mean, there was a lot of Kirk development in the previous issues. So when they made this one, they still focused on Kirk. It was a love story with him, but also, I mean, it was more than a sappy love story. It actually showed his feelings. And this time, the woman was basically an equal. She was a Starfleet captain. And it had the issues like, well, if they're both serving captains of their own ship, how could they ever be together? But it was
I like that. It showed the struggles of captaincy. Do you remember? James Kirk said that he couldn't do anything. He couldn't get married. There was no room for women in his life because he was married to the ship. And this just shows what it's like. And his girlfriend made the point saying, only we could understand the pressures that we have being Starfleet captains.
Exactly. It's a lonely life.
Mm-hmm. So he found someone that was on his level. I thought it was beautifully done.
And it's a story that encompasses time too. You'll see later on it goes to several years in the future and everything. It was it was a beautiful love story, and I think it characterized Kirk very well. And of course, he said he's been in love before, but this is different. And this time he actually envisioned that he might have a future with this person. But we'll see how it goes.
All right. So overall, this is essentially roughly a year's worth of comics. What do you think were the high points, and what do you think some of the things that you would like to have seen tweaked?
The high point was, the story itself, the characterizations of Kirk having his self-doubt. I like that, just making him more human, but still making him the captain, and he was still able to make his command decisions all through the stories.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to have seen more development on some of the other characters. Of course, Uhura stood out in these too.
Oh, I think that was one of the high points for me, the Jodie Hauser issues. I mean, it just shows, and it harkens back to Enterprise. And in Sato, she knew how to communicate on various levels. Communication officer isn't someone that just translates, but you have to be adept at all forms of communication.
Yeah, that was good, showing that communications is not just being, as some people described Uhura, a telephone operator. It is more than that.
And she was thinking outside of the box a lot. Again, I'm the same way as you. I'm always looking for the characters we don't see a lot of. The issues that showed Sulu in it, focusing in a lot on him. That's what I want. I want the characters that I don't see on television enough. I mean, we were like that with the books. Do you remember in the 80s? We were just like, oh, these novels are so good. They focus in on the characters I want to know the backgrounds of. So, I mean, that's one of the things I love about this Year 5 series.
And maybe later we'll get more, Chekhov, and really even having more for Spock and McCoy would have been good too. But I see how they couldn't really do everyone, and maybe they will later on in the series.
Issue 10 ends with Lieutenant Arex joining the bridge crew, and that's the only thing that was just a little mishap, because if this takes place after the animated series, well, we know Arex was in the animated series. So that one, I don't know if it's...
A little time displacement.
Yeah, a little time displacement, or maybe what I'm thinking is, because I'm always trying to figure out how to make sense out of it, maybe they're saying that, well, he was just a fill-in a little bit on the animated series, but now he's going to have a regular station in Year 5.
It could be that, even though on the animated series it looked like he was more than a fill-in.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe he was. He just happened to be in the episodes that we saw.
But we got the official introduction. That's the important point. And we saw Chekhov being reassigned to security.
Yeah, they explained that. And so other things in the story, as we both said, the part with a piece of the action sequel was a little off. The rest of the story was pretty good, all the different storylines.
It's definitely worth getting in your pull box at your local comic store.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.